Composer Gloves here, and today we are starting a series on Maximus. What is Maximus? Someone asked me this, and I had already had a series written out for it, and I've just been sort of putting it off because I've been doing so many other things, and it's a really cool tool, so I really want to show it to you. Now, I use Maximus. So this is the introduction to Maximus. So this is going to be a little mini series in the FL12 effects series. And what this is going to focus on is Maximus. We're going to be learning specific tools, reasons why you would use Maximus versus another plugin. Actually, I'll explain some of those in this video. I'm going to briefly overlook all the controls at light speed in this video. So if you know what you're doing, you can pretty much hit the ground running with this. And yeah, so I expect you to know what compression is. I have a video, what is compression? Go look it up on my YouTube channel. I don't believe that's the exact title, but it's somewhere along those lines. And then I have another video entitled Multiband Effects. What multiband compression, I believe, is the video title. Go look up that one too. Those two, because they specifically address this. I also expect you to have general knowledge. If you don't have general knowledge, I'm specifically looking for digital audio basics and sound and synth basics. If you have those two things down, you are prepared to sort of tackle this. So I'm going to be covering it. We'll be looking at more nitty-gritty parts of compression. So it's super important that you know about compression and what it does. You need to know about attack, release, sustain, all that mumbo jumbo. Now, let's jump into this really quick. So what is Maximus? Maximus is a multiband compressor. I have a track here. It is a poorly mixed track. Honestly, I'd redo a number of things, but I was working pretty quick because I just wanted to have something to show you what Maximus can offer you in your productions. And I tried to use a variety of outputs. So first I'm going to show you a before and after. And I'm going to be a little biased. Anyone who has, is any good at sound design and mixing, maybe not sound design, but knows their stuff about mixing, knows that it's really hard to qualitatively judge what you're listening to if it's louder the second go around. Well, this is going to get louder the second go around. So I want you to pay attention to clarity. I purposely sort of made a mix like this because it sounds quite muddy and dull. And so I want you to see how much clearer a mix can sound using the sonic qualities of Maximus, because you can use it as a conventional compressor, but what it offers is so much more than that. So, and I have other compressors that I think in many cases exceed what I would want to do with Maximus. So we'll talk about this in a sec. So here it is. So just memorize this sound. Just pay attention to transients. So that's what you got there. So it's sort of like this dull, a lot of sub, a big sort of boomy track. And then I'm going to turn on Maximus on all the individual tracks. I don't know if there's a way for me to assign a hotkey for this. That's probably such a feature that no one's ever requested before. I wish there was a way to assign a hotkey to mute and unmute all things dynamically. Well, oh no, wait, you know what? You probably could do that. You can link it to a controller, and then I could have a button to do that. Oh man, I should have thought of that. Never mind, totally a thing. So here is me over here thinking I'm so cool and advanced. Yeah, right, man. So here it is with Maximus. So remember that last sound, sort of dull, boomy, boom, boom, boom. And now we're going to listen to it with it. Okay, now we're going to go through and I want to show you each of the individual elements with and without. So listen to the kick. This is with. This is without. I actually kind of like it more without, so I'm going to leave it off. That's a little bit ironic. This is now there's two kicks though. That's one of the reasons why. So watch. Now let's listen to the kick again. Now I'm going to take off the second kick. Now I do not like that more, so I'm going to put Maximus back on. You see, that's a very noticeable difference. So very cool. Now let's go over here. This is the main synth bass line. I'm going to take it off. And you see the clarity just goes away. If I put it back on. So that's something that I would mess with more. There's also, it's really interesting if you listen to the hi-hats. And now let me take it off. It's a very subtle difference. So let me show you. Let's get even more specific going here. There it is. So listen to it now without. See, it loses the brightness. it gets brighter with it on. Why? Well, I'm doing an interesting thing here. So let's breeze over these controls real quick, like I said I was going to do. And then I'm going to be explaining a lot of things in the series, trying to give you examples. It's not going to be a mixing series, but you will walk out of here knowing a lot of stuff, man, that I just straight wish I had known about compression. So right off the bat, you'll notice here that there's a whole bunch of, there's basically 3 parts, I guess, really to Maximus. There's this grid area that allows you to manipulate amplitude. This is where you would conventionally set ratio. This is like the ratio button has been replaced by this, and your threshold button has been replaced by this if you know about your compressors. This is where you see your levels. You can get a visual representation and read your stuff. You have different bands, so you can select your bands here. You can turn the compression off, or you can even mute a band. This is very useful if all you want to do is use Maximus for its filters, because it's got really good filters to split signals so that you can process signal with different effect lines, different effect stacks. And then you have a master band. So there's all these things you can do. You notice the master band, you can also turn that off. So it's sort of an interesting deal. So it can output these individually. You have stereo separation knob. You have a solo knob, so you can hear your signal as you go through. So very useful tool. You can make things mono by turning it that way, or you can turning it that way. What is that? To the right, or you can turn it to the left and separate them. This separation enhances separation. It's already in your track. So if your track's mono, it's not going to do anything. If it's got stereo information, it will do stuff. So that's a useful trick. You have your pre and post that allows you to change how fast it comes in here. The threshold now this is a saturation thing. Advanced setting warning. We're going to be talking about this in a separate video just for this, because it gets into hard clipping versus soft clipping, which is a really cool topic. So we're going to approach it there. Next, you have your attack, sustain, release, and then you have all these curve options. What are these curve options? Well, these curve options allow you to change the way things are interpreted. Okay, so you have various different ways for it to release, but there are various different tensions and curves that can be accomplished. Maximus is really cool as a compressor in that you can get way specific with the way this is done. A lot of compressors, especially things that are modeling hardware units, decide this sort of for you. You think you have controls, but come on, there's like one knob. Like, how are you supposed to be that specific? So this allows you to change that. We'll take a look at this later. You have a sustain option, which could be important when dealing with distortion. You have a peak and RMS option. So peak, what peak does in RMS, so peak will respond to peaks. It reads it like that. RMS will respond to longer chunks of information, because that's how we hear in RMS. So we'll talk about that a little bit later too. You have a low, mid, high delay. So when transients come in, your whole goal is kind of to preserve that transient. This will allow you to put a look ahead so that you can, so the stuff comes in, but it delays your audio so it can perfectly attack that transient and bring you down to the ground. It's like you're spider hunting, and when the spider jumps at you, you don't know when the spider's gonna jump, but when it jumps, you can hit pause and you can perfectly destroy that spider instead of like maybe only chopping it halfway. You can take out a hammer and just completely. So that's what this allows you to do. So it's a very cool option. You can do a variety of things. We'll talk about this more in detail. You have a low, mid, high mix. So a very common trick. A lot of you guys probably know it. It's called New York compression or parallel compression. It's when you have an uncompressed version and a compressed version, and you mix them together. And when you mix them together, you will preserve the transients on one, but achieve a larger value in your RMS, thus creating the illusion that it's more consistent dynamically, but keeps the punch of the transients, preserving the quality that they've given you. So we're going to be taking a look at that. Very, very cool. Very simple trick. Okay, we have the ability to split our bands. You can see the volume of each individual band by just manipulating like that. You can see my pre-gain is moving around. So these are pre-gain levels. These are not post-gain levels. Okay, so you could set the bands and their frequencies here. You can also solo and listen. Very useful. One other cool trick is you can turn on your analyzer and you can see a spectrum analysis of your stuff. So you can very specifically say, oh, my hi-hat looks right here, and set that. You can alt-click to reset any values. Well, if you do that, does this reset that too? What if I do this? Nope, I don't know what I'm talking about. You have some options for your filters. Now, typically, if you know about IIR and FIR filters, you will know that one introduces phase shifts, so you have the ability to change it to a linear phase. You also have oversampling in here for you digital audio basics people who've watched that series or know what this is, you can oversample. However, you will get oversampling anyways when you render out of FL. At least I believe so, because they have that option for all their native stuff. So I generally don't turn it on in here. It mostly matters with high frequency content anyways. There is the ability to have a spare state, so you can compare settings with another setting rapidly, so you can, hear if it's making a difference. Sometimes it's a little tough. You can also set up the master mode, the mid mode, to control the master compressor. And that is useful because you could theoretically use it for sidechain and de-essing, but we're going to talk about why I disagree with using that for those reasons in a little bit. And then you can choose the linear phase, which is what I was getting to. So you can choose linear phase filters, and look, they're even so fancy. They have a shortcut for it. It's F. If you open up this menu and push F, it turns it on. That's pretty crazy. They have shortcuts like that just hanging around for like really little knobs, but they don't have a shortcut for being able to get to the file menu, for example. I'm like, these weird decisions. So now we have a low cut. This is a really cool low cut because it's a very clean low cut. Very useful for getting rid of rumble. And these are the spare states. You could store one here, and then if we were to make some changes, you can then go back and forth between those. And you have the ability to lock a spare state, which I believe also stays through presets. So if you were to change presets, you would keep your spare state if you were to lock it. But I'm not 100% sure. I haven't tested it. It was in the manual, which are things that I read because, it's pretty helpful to read the manual. Okay. Now, I really quick do want to give you, so why Maximus? Why this plugin? Why not another plugin? So before in future videos, we're going to be looking at applying and a little more in detail on why you would use particular knobs, but why Maximus in the first place? Well, Maximus has this. This is a spline graph, and it is a little bit different than a wave shaper. A wave shaper looks at things on a per cycle level, and so it will distort things. And so you can essentially look at a wave shaper almost like an EQ, but it's also like an envelope too. It's a little confusing. The whole thing's just a mess, but we're going to be talking about this big time because it allows you to do crazy things. Like you could do this and that. What does this mean? Well, you're expanding this part of your envelope, which if you think of the envelope of a sound, so let's get to something basic. Let's look at this kick, right? This kick has a part where it starts off and where the front end of its attack is very loud. So you see we have a peak right here, and then the decay, this area of the sound, is the soft part, right? Well, that's going to cause it to come in, and different parts of it at different moments are going to be loud. So if we were to do something like this, let's say that we wanted to do this. So first, I'm going to expand right here. We're going to be talking a lot about this graph in another video because it's a pretty dense concept if you've never thought about this before. But essentially, let's say that we boost this stuff right down here. So this means our really, really soft signal is going to be increased by a couple decibels. We could even do something like wild, like this. Okay, so we're boosting it by a lot of decibels now. So as it comes in, it's like, what does that mean? For us, what does that shape mean? This means that when the content is soft or entering in through that area of dynamic range, so in order for it to get to this value, it by definition has to go through the quieter values to get to that loud value. So it's got to start, because it starts from like, your speakers aren't moving, the sound isn't there, and then it goes wah, wah. So this area of your waveform, the area that's softer, will be emphasized. And that area represents high harmonic information. So you're going to experience this, but it will move up here. And what's represented down here will then be more spectrum based. So you'll be thinking of, think of an EQ and think of like, if you were to freeze that picture of the EQ and look at what the softest signals are, that's what's going to be compressed now. So that may be like noise and stuff. So that might be where like low noise might come out. So you'll hear this become a very sort of muddy effect, but it will have like a nice pleasant effect on your transient. And so there's some interesting things you could do to try and process transients differently than this low level noise based on that concept. But if you understood that, great. If you didn't, it's not super important, but you're missing out on a massive tool for just making stuff sound the way you want it to sound. So this is going to be something we're going to be talking about. Very, very interesting. It does look, and because it looks at it from an envelope fashion, and you can see that from the way it pops up. You see it being represented as an envelope as it comes in. It goes doon, doon, doon. So we can manipulate that. So we could apply compression and expansion. We could compress that and expand that in the same area. And that way it can be looked at as a wave shaper. But again, a wave shaper doesn't look at things quite the same way. The basic difference is a wave shaper looks at like really like on a single cycle sample levels, whereas this looks at it in a little more of a broad sense, detecting peaks and RMS. Now, RMS will cause these changes also to be interpreted differently because it will ignore peaks. So you can just do weird crap, man, with Maximus. So that's Maximus in a nutshell. There's one other control I guess I should show you. That's the speed option. So you can, if we play it, you could change how fast your display moves. You can also pause it by clicking on it. And this is another weird thing. I don't know why it's like this, but if you turn it off or if you just like, I don't know, in other DAWs, what that's called, bypass. If you bypass it, then it does this. I have no idea why they chose that, but it looks cool. So it's just funny. If you have any questions about this, let me know. We will be talking about some pretty interesting topics later on and relative to Maximus. So yeah, subscribe, support me on Patreon. I've got a Patreon and I really appreciate it when people support me. People like you let me do things like this to help hopefully you succeed. And have a blessed day. Those little sparkles at moments. So essentially, that's the sound. And it was made completely in Citrus, no external, nothing. And ideally, you'll take it, you'll find a moment in it that you like, and you'll use that moment.